Yo, it's your boy Openly, and today we're just gonna be doing yet another My Hero What If. So let's get into it. This is what if Deku had Kirby's powers. Deku would actually have a quirk here, and it would basically be, well, amphibiate, and that's what I'm just gonna call it. And Deku is pretty much training his powers all the time with this 10-year period. And no, Bakugo doesn't really bully him. Actually, Bakugo is kind of wary of him, and sometimes he doesn't even wanna mess with Deku. Neither does any of the students because with Kirby's powers, he can basically take anybody's quirk. But it's just slightly different, just because he just puts his hand out, and basically their quirk just gets sucked right out of them, and they can't use it until he wants to give it back. So Deku is pretty much growing up, just being fared, and when he's using his quirk, he can just take anybody's quirk if he wanted to. So he doesn't get into a lot of fights, but he gets into more 1v1 fights, only hand-to-hand combat, than really quirks, because if he used this quirk on somebody, he would just instantly just get bodied. And plus, when he uses quirk, he can basically shift, not into different things, but yeah, just shape. He can change his shape while just still looking as the same person. And when you hit him, he's just basically a bouncy. He's like, if you would punch him in his face, he would be bouncy. So it would just bounce right off. So Deku is pretty much invincible at that point. So Deku pretty much grows up kind of being favored, I guess you could say, when he uses his quirk. So he does get a recommendation from other schools, and not from UA, because UA don't know that much, but they know something. And once Deku does, I should say, once he does get into or out of school, he exits the school and he goes for a shortcut. And he's pretty much going for a shortcut, and he's going right through the tunnel. And as he's doing this, he would hear the sewer pot pretty much open, and he would look behind him, and he would start using his quirk. The sludge monster would jump on him, and the sludge monster would fall back. Deku smirks, and he starts basically trying to contain the sludge monster. And by the time that All Might is here, he pretty much is a little bit scuffed up, and he has the sludge monster in a container. He would hand it to All Might and basically freak out and ask him for an autograph. And pretty much the whole rundown happens. All Might pretty much says, if you need training, come to Degama Beach. And he would jump off. Deku would just say like, dang, that's crazy. And he would go on and live his life. And pretty much tell his mom that he met All Might and all that stuff. And once the next day comes, he would go to Degama Beach, and he would see All Might there, and All Might would basically give him the rundown about All for One and One for All, and needing a successor, and if he got attacked by All for One and he just died for some reason, he would need somebody to basically pass on his quirk again and be the next number one hero. And Deku pretty much knowing that he's really not invincible. There's a lot of things that he can't do with his quirk. So Deku pretty much says, yeah, sure. And he would get the quirk, and since the way his quirk works, he has to use One for All when his quirk is activated. If he doesn't use it when his quirk is activated, it can break his bones. But basically, when his quirk is activated, it makes his bones they're still a solid thing, but when you apply force to it, it would basically bounce back off. So his bones don't really break. So he basically, his bones don't break when he uses his quirk. So he can throw full 100%, punches, and he can still have the electricity all around him. So Deku would pretty much get his quirk and pretty much be a master of it, but he would have to use his quirk. And pretty much but the way his actual Kirby quirk actually makes, it doesn't activate with him doing it. It just activates on its own because Kirby is always Kirby. So I'm just gonna. So he would pretty much walk. He would get to UA. He would be running there, and he would trip over himself, and Deku would pretty much not. He would pretty much. Kirby's quirk would basically activate, and he would bounce on the ground and get back up on his feet. And that's when Uraraka would basically use her quirk on him because she was about to do it. And he would float up, and they would have a friendly conversation after Uraraka would release the quirk, and they would exchange names and tell them each other the quirk that they have, and they just have a conversation, and Deku pretty much goes inside of UA to go do the written test. He does pretty good on, and Deku's at basically the explanation for, the robots, and there he gets the explanation, and as soon as he hears robots, he knows what he has to do. So Deku just says, okay, whatever. And he would just walk out of there, and he would just wait for everybody else. Since he already has a plan to get the robots, he would already have a plan to get the robots, and yeah. So as soon as everybody gets there, he would just fall back on purpose, and that's when he would bounce over the gate and already get multiple points before anybody else could. And Deku would have the highest points, about 89. And near the end of the match, Deku and the rest of the people there would hear the ground rumbling, and a zero-pointer robot would emerge from the ground and knock over a building, which pretty much has a whole bunch of debris falling people like Uraraka, and Deku would see this, so he would pretty much drop from the building that he was on and bounce on the ground, and so he can get high enough. And at this point, he's over the head of it, and he pretty much sees Uraraka, and he knows her quirk. So he would pretty much put his hand out, and it seemed like a light beam would come from her, taking her quirk for now, and he would pretty much touch the zero pointer. It would float up, and he would fall back to the floor, the ground, and bounce, and he would release. Then he would basically give Uraraka's quirk back just by pointing his hand back at her, and pretty much destroy the robot. And she's like, "How did you do that?" He says, "That's probably basically what you could do with your quirk was bounce." And Deku's like, "Well, I can kind of steal quirks too. I gave your quirk back though. And pretty much everybody is amazed by this. Even All Might knew he can do it, but he didn't know he can do it with no contact. So Deku could pretty much do anything he wants. Aizawa is interested. Everybody there is pretty much interested in what he can do. Ida's even like, what, bro? And Eventually, days later, you'd get a envelope pretty much telling the class that he passed and everybody's gonna come to UA. And they do all come to UA, and Deku is pretty much looking for this. Well, I guess is looking for class 1A, and he's going up to the first floor. He's looking for class 1A. He's on the first floor, and he doesn't see it there. And he doesn't see it anywhere. So he goes to the second floor, and he finally does find it. And he wonders why the door is so big. He would open the door, and he would see, Tenya, Ida, and Bakugo would be basically arguing. Bakugo would pretty much be like, or Tenya, Ida pretty much is saying, first day you're already scuffing up the school, you should probably stop. And Bakugo pretty much telling him that he has to stick up his ass and go home, that you're not supposed to be here, you're a reject and all this bullshit. So Ida don't really like that, but since he opens the door, he opens the door and attention is on him, Ida would pretty much come up to him and start trying to talk to him, and Deku would pretty much talk to him and just yeah, I know your name, and they would introduce themselves, and that's when Uraraka would come tap on Deku's shoulder and pretty much say hi to each other again, and they would sit near each other because they kind of already know each other. So that's when Aizawa would basically tell them to shut up and get outside for. You would pretty much tell them to get outside, and they would, and they would all be outside, and Deku and the rest of the class, they're pretty much asking Aizawa, what are we supposed to be doing out here? Aizawa would pretty much, take a ball from his pocket and hand it to Deku and say, you got first in the entrance exam, and it would catch Todoroki and Bakugo's eye, and Bakugo would just basically be like, I knew he was going to get a high grade, but I didn't know he was going to get first. And Deku would pretty much, I'll say he can make anything else, like, really, really. So Deku pretty much being a pretty smart person, he would look at Uraraka and he would just put his hand out and he would take her quirk again, and he would pretty much use it to throw the ball and get infinity. And like, what? That's kind of hacks. He says, well, it's a part of my quirk, so it worked. And Deku would continue on to get first place. And since he can make himself bouncy, he even got even better score than Moneta, so he would get first place on that too. And in the race, he's pretty goddamn fast, bro. So in the long jump, he would pretty much make his feet bouncy, I guess, and he would just jump 50 feet in the air and just land at the end. And Deku at the race would pretty much be like, dang, he said my quirk doesn't really apply, but one for all does, and he would pretty much charge up 100% of one for all and instantly blitz the finish line and easily get a 100% or the first place for it, I guess you can say. And Deku pretty much being the role model for strength and smarts for every student in the class, basically. So he's pretty much the strongest in there. And even Aizawa was amazed by its power. And Todoroki says, I was holding back, he won't beat me. No, he won't beat me in the fight. All this bullshit. And Bakugo has yet to even get a hit on him in a fight. Like, bro, they fought once and has yet to even get a hit on him. He still thinks that he can never get a hit on him. And Deku would pretty much be like, yeah, it was fun. to do this, and that's when All Might would pretty much pop up and pretty much tell them and explain about the hero versus villains, and you know, and pretty much one of the students like Mineta and Kaminari and Kirishima and even Bakugo and Tenya would pretty much be like, yeah, if two of us have to go against him, that's not fair. He's like the strongest in the class. Come on, like we had to have more teammates than him. And All Might would take this in consideration, and Deku's like, what? And All Might would pretty much pin everybody against Deku now. And Deku just says, well, this just makes this a whole lot easier. And they don't really know what he's talking about, but it is what it is. And once they do get to the copy, the fake town or city, once they do get in there, it's a bigger building this time because the rest of the students are in there. And pretty much there's some people like Todoroki and Bakugo and Tenya and Kirishima and Mineta and Kaminari pretty much there. And they're all there trying to instantly get Deku. And Deku would say, before he even walks in, I know you're there. Like, you didn't think I was gonna watch y'all get inside the building. And Deku would pretty much make himself bouncy and come there, and every hit that they would land, they would basically come back to them, I guess you can say. It's like shock absorption, I guess. It would just be bounce-ified. And they would pretty much every hit they would get, it wouldn't do any pain to him. He would just bounce straight off and go to a wall. And that's when Mineta tries to throw his balls at him. But Deku just makes those shit bounce off of him. And he grabs Mineta by his arm and pretty much throws him up the stairs. And Bakugo starts using explosions. And Deku puts his hand out and takes Bakugo's explosions. And he pretty much uses an AP shot back at him. And right at him. This is all happening on the first floor. And so it pretty much hits Todoroki, Bakugo, Kaminari, and Kirishima. They're pretty hurt by it. So Deku gets upstairs. He'll take Kirishima's quirk, and he would pretty much corner Kirishima and pretty much have like a little blade from his finger at his neck, and he says, "Don't even move. Just don't even try." And he would pretty much take care of Todoroki real quick. Todoroki would try to use his ice by stopping on the floor, pretty much making his teammates unable to move, pretty much disadvantaging him. And since Deku is bouncy to anything, he would just bounce off of ice too, and he would pretty much touch the ceiling. And do a little, I guess he touches the ceiling and kind of brings his feet to the ceiling too, and pushes himself off of it. And he's kind of going fast with that because he's using one for all, in his Kirby quirk, while he's just bouncing around. So he's pretty much Gran Torino, just using Gran Torino's thing, and just bouncing around, just smacking Todoroki up. And Todoroki's pretty much getting bodied, and Todoroki is done for, and he pretty much has to go on to the next people. So he goes up to the second floor. Nothing's really happening over there. So he goes up to the third. Then he sees some of the people on the fourth floor, and he would see Uraraka. I guess Uraraka and Jiro and Ojiro and fuck, who else is in the class? And Momo. So Deku would pretty much take all their quirks and says, "I just took all your quirks, which I really want. Y'all have nothing right now. Like, y'all have nothing." And they pretty much surrender at this point, and there's pretty much nobody left. So the hero team basically wins, and Deku just pretty much ran through everybody pretty much easily, and Deku would pretty much do anything. Like Deku just did everything to win, and and the class was still wasn't even fair to fight him like that, and Deku said it was fair, and they would pretty much be like nah, and they would pretty much have a conversation and argue about how it wasn't fair, and they would pretty much have a little time skip of 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, they would have the USJ They would have the USJ happen, and they pretty much are all flying up to the bus, and Deku and would pretty much Deku in the class or Froppy or whoever who has what quirk. Now he would pretty much tell them everybody their quirk, and everybody will be talking about quirks until they get to the USJ. And once they are in it, once they are in it, Deku would kind of, let's just say somebody had multiple quirks. If Deku would point on them, he would take all of their quirks, even the quirk that they would have to get multiple quirks. So Deku would pretty much be a god, I guess you can say. And Deku would see Shigaraki and Karagiri and the rest of the 300 bad guys. I'ma up the level of bad guys there. And Deku would see them all, and he's like, this is not good. And pretty much the whole class gets teleported to different places. So he pretty much ends up into the water place like he was before with Froppy and Mineta. But Deku would make a plan pretty quickly. He would tell Mineta to use his quirk to pretty much stick the two people together, and he would use one for all. He wouldn't tell him that he would use it one for all, but he would use one for all for a flick to get them both out the water and pretty much subdue them. And they would pretty much get out pretty quickly, and so the other people. So they would have the rest of the class pretty much come out and see Aizawa getting fucked up by the Nomu. So they're like, nah, bro, that's my teacher. And they all try to come up, and everybody gets bodied. And until Deku just says, he seems stronger than everybody in the class. I'm just gonna take his quirks, or just take his quirk, because he doesn't know that he has more than one quirk. So he would take his quirk, and now the Nomu is basically just a big idiot. Yeah, his punches hurt, but it's not gonna be able to kill. So, well, actually, yeah, I guess you can say it does hurt, because he doesn't have no super strength. So Deku, so it's easily killable. And now that Deku has these quirks, and since it's a villain, he don't even gotta give it back. So Deku can do whatever he wants. And now that he has these quirks, I'll say any quirk that he gains, it just activates wherever it feels it has to. So when the Nomu comes up to go and hit him, he just wouldn't even budge because it's the shock absorption. And that's when Deku would pretty much use one for all with 100% and pretty much punch a full hole. Just punch the whole top half of him off, basically, and save the day before All Might even came. So All Might didn't have to waste no time. So, pretty much Deku's getting praised for this, and they kind of get 2 weeks off because of some things, because of USJ. He didn't get to take Shigaraki's quirk, and plus, he knows his disintegration with hands, and he kind of needs his hands. So he doesn't really he doesn't really like that. He doesn't want that quirk. So Deku would just leave with the rest of the class, and they would all have 2 weeks off. And that's where this shopping thing happens, I guess. They all go out to shop like they did in season 3, but it's happening in season 1 now. And Deku is pretty much going shopping with the rest of the people, and it's pretty much him and Uraka left alone, and they would pretty much have a conversation and go off to go shop for whatever they wanted to do. So back to UA. So once they are at UA, they would pretty much be told about the final exams, and they would pretty much be told about them. And Deku would be teamed up with Bakugo, and he doesn't really have a problem with it. And versus All Might. And listen, I'm just gonna put it like this: All Might get dropped, bro. All Might get dropped. So Deku just says, "I can handle him." And Bakugo gets kind of angry. He says, "No, you can't." And he says, "Watch me then." And he just says, "Bet, watch me then. You owe me $200. If I can be All Might, you owe me $200." And Bakugo would say yes. And pretty much everybody would know about this because it's being recorded too. And not everybody. People don't think that he can get it. He can beat All Might, but Uraka does, so it counts. And he pretty much uses 100% of One For All. And the choice matches him. He uses his own move, so it's just even more disrespectful. So he pretty much bodies All Might, and he pretty much beats him, and Bakugo owes him $200. So Bakugo go home, and now he gotta tell his mom, "Oh well, I kind of promised the kid that if he beat All Might, I'm gonna have to give him $200. So you're gonna have to open up the wallet." I don't even know what I would do, man. I would just have to shoot you. So pretty much days later, they'll get told about the forest exams, I guess. And everyone's like, "Dang, you're kind of taking a lot of these exams." And Deku would pretty much be like, "Okay, bet." And they would pretty much be at the Wild. They would pretty much be on the bus in the forest, and the Pussycats, the heroes, they would pretty much explain everything that was going on, and that's when everything would fall. But Deku would bounce halfway through, so he would just bounce again and get way off through. And that's when everybody would come about 5 hours later, and Deku would just be like, "What took y'all so long?" And says, "Well, not having a quirk that can make you bounce." And pretty much he just says okay, and they would all eat and have food and train for the rest of the day and train for a couple of more days. So pretty much on the last day, I guess, and Deku is pretty much still training, and he can pretty much bounce to better heights, and using his shock absorption. Like at this point, he doesn't even have to use the bounce to stop hits. He can just use shock absorption and regeneration. So if anything could even pierce through him, he would just have super regeneration to instantly save him. And the way, if Deku were to get a quirk, it would mutate it. And it would basically, any quirk that doesn't really evolve, touch, if he had Bakugo's quirk, if he took it, he would be able to give it to somebody else. He basically has All For One, basically. And no, rumors are getting around that he has the same quirk. So that's when they attack. But that's pretty much where I'm gonna leave it off. So yeah. Bye. All for One is gonna be there.